Washington College you've met and probably would meet. As I've already written in a brief introduction about the group, what are groupers. Just a few words, it is a group of 7 farmers who are just trying to take an initiative within Pakistan, and we are happy and elated to this extent that in Pakistan's history that has never happened, that growers would be sending in 15 40 feet containers on their own and taking 100% risk on their own to the European market, which is looking for, I would say, a better quality mango. There's a bit of pessimism and there is a bit of optimism. The optimism is of course there because we think that this is the time where the private sector should take their own initiative. We also think that people who are trying to support us are also looking at an industry, that what kind of initiative is industry taking, or they're just laying back and trying to see whether it's 100% risk-free environment that they want to get in. So we have taken an initiative. We appreciate Ray Collins and his team to come in and take time for us to making a presentation to us. I would also like to welcome and recognize the presence of ASF USAID people here, Mr. Nazir Isani, who is the regional program manager, with Mr. Majid, who will be working in horticulture sector. We asked them that this initiative is being taken, and why not to come here and listen and see what we could do. Basically, I have already, what I've told Ray that it's going to be, what we're going to do this year is that it's a 15 40 feet containers arriving approximately around June 25th in Netherlands, and before that from May 21st to May 15th will be airlifted mangoes, which will be approximately 54 tons going till June 15th, and then there will be 2-3 containers as we get the schedules from sea liners arrival till July. So there is a good substantial quantity and the timing of mango that will be arriving with the Soul Food, so that Soul Food also could commit resources to the group here. Having said that, as I said, that it's a big challenge for us. The pre and post harvest parameters, as I've said, have not come up as standing operating procedures. What we intend to do at our farms to create a consistent quality are not up to the mark as of now, and that is a major concern for us as to at arrival how the mango will be. Second thing is, after arrival, the Soul Food is also new in handling Pakistani mangoes. What should they expect? What should they do after arriving at Pakistani mangoes? When they give it to their customers, what should they tell their customers to do with their mangoes? So all these things are there. We're just trying to minimize our risks. There's a lot to talk, which we will do as the time goes. Right now, without wasting time, again, we will have Professor Ray Collins with us. I have had the privilege to work previously for last 3 years when the ASLP1 was with it in the supply chain side, and also have a privilege of getting a certificate from University of Queensland for the supply chain of mangoes under Professor Ray Collins. He has an experience of 25 years in creating a value chain, you can call it, or a cluster you can call it, but in simple terms it's linking farmers to the market, in the persimmon market if I'm not wrong. There's a lot of research that Professor Ray has done, which he will start his talk, and Peter Johnson will be the main person today, who is again an expert in sending sea-freighted mangoes, the kind of issues which he himself elaborated. Then there will be a discussion, the way we have, we're discussing how to really organize this. When Peter starts speaking, if there are a point of discussion, you can break Peter to ask him if you have a question, if you want to discuss something. Otherwise, at the end of the presentation, we can discuss a lot. And lastly, we'll have Mr. Yasin from China, who's going to talk a bit on the Chinese market, the customer base in China of Pakistani mangoes, and I'm told as to what to expect, what are quarantine, SPS, sanitary phytosanitary requirements, and how can our group work to really cater to mangoes. As I said, we have 4 pack houses located from south of Sindh, from Kotli to Nawab Shah, at different strategic places which can supply mangoes for continuously 1 month. So that's how it is, and I'll now give Professor Wade to brief talk.
Thanks, Mahmood. Thank you for your welcome and for your introduction. It's an absolute pleasure for us to be here today. And when we started this project back in 2006 in phase 1, we probably hoped but never imagined that we might reach the point where a group of growers on their own initiative would propose something like this. So I can assure you on behalf of our project team, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Australian teams and the Pakistani colleagues in our teams, both pre and post harvest, that we will give you every possible support to help you make this a success, because someone has to do it first, as I just said to Mahmood. Someone has to be first, and there's no more optimistic or pessimistic position to be in than to be the first to try something, because while the payoff can be very significant, the problems are definitely there. And so it's good fortune that we can be here today with Peter Johnson, who is a world authority on sea freighted mangoes, to talk to you about his experience and what he knows of the situation in terms of the technology of sea freighting mangoes. And I'm especially glad that people from agencies, apart from the farmers, are also here. And I would suggest that you should be as interested in this and be learning as much from this as anyone else, because in the work you do, to be involved in a group like this has tremendous potential for your ability to move back beyond this group on the mango industry in Pakistan. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to the discussions this afternoon, but I won't steal Peter Johnson's time, because he really is the person you need to talk to. When Peter finishes, we'll have a short discussion about how to make groups like this succeed from our experience, things to look out for, and the things you should try and achieve. And we're open to discuss for as long as you need to, as long as we have time available and your proposal to that. So let's make the most of it. And of course, Yasin, from a China perspective, may definitely have something of interest to you, because you also grow early season chancellor in Sydney, and that may be of interest to Yasin. So could I introduce you to Peter Johnson from Agriculture is Food, Western Australia. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Ray. First of all, I find this is really refreshing, and it actually brings back some memories, because 12 years ago in Australia I was sitting down with a group of 10 or 12 mango growers from Western Australia, and all discussing the same concept. How do we get mangoes from Australia to Europe? The difference between now and then was it had never been done before. The technology was only just starting to be developed. It had never been tried or tested. And the growers got together and formed a group and said, we're going to do that. And the beauty, 12 years onwards, the advantage that you guys have got is, we've been there, we've done it, and there are lots of mistakes and lots of things go wrong, and we've done it. And we've made every mistake you possibly can make in doing this, but they persisted and persisted, and in the end, we actually ended up developing a system where we could deliver consistently, time and time again, fruit of quality that was meeting customers' expectations. So it's not an easy process, and so please don't illude yourself that it is going to be easy. It's not. It is difficult, but the reward's definitely there if you get it right. And so the big advantage that a group you have got is you can actually draw on the knowledge and that that's already happened, and so you don't have to make the mistakes that we make. So what want to run through today is really an idea of how you build a system to actually do the seed frame.
Peter,
Ross,
if you ask Sahar to change the slides for you, maybe stand up there.
Yeah, all right.
We can see them. Just stand in front there.
Yeah. So this is just a bit of an overview of what I want to go through today. Some of it I've just been sort of trying to glean out of the mood where you are actually in this process, because some of it I can skim through fast and some I'll have to spend a bit more time on. But so if we just flick over the next slide, I just want to really, fortunately the colour's not doesn't come out that well.
Yeah.
But the message I want to get out here and the understanding, which is actually not quite often fully understood. What you see on the tree is as good as a mango will ever get, quality-wise. It's as good as it possibly can ever get. From that point onwards, of harvesting, it can only go downhill quality. Putting them in CA containers is not a hospital. They don't get better. So it's basically how you manage it and how you manage that fruit. From that point to get to the consumer, all you can do is delay the degradation of that fruit and the declining quality. And that's a really important thing to remember, because every practice that you do along that chain has an impact. And the impact is not necessarily you're going to see the impact. The impact is at the other end. We're going to see so what I would like to do, just to sort of a bit of a session starter, is really get some ideas of what you perceive as the risks. And if we've got Sahar's going to take some notes for us. Just a bit of a discussion, just to start, is you guys going into this exercise, what do you see as the risk, and what are your concerns as risks in this process?
Mango at arrival.
Mangoes at arrival?
This is a question to the mango grower.
Yeah, it's a question to you. What are your concerns about? What do you see as the risks in this process?
In post-harvest, we don't have that much experience. Why we will design to refer container or CA container. We don't know what setting should be there. Not only temperatures but other humidity. So that can be automated at the end of
Last year we had sent to refill container and mango to Europe, and owing to difference in temperature container, they show some problems. So we are concerned.
And one thing more, in the grading issue, there were issues that the color didn't change in the box. Similar. There's fewer green and fewer
Uneven ripening.
Yeah, uneven
ripening. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real
Basic question which we would like to ask you is, what is the perishable time for the mango to reach a first destination of 30 days? If it is containerized, how much time would it take to get perished?
Well, I'll throw that back at
And we
you.
would like to know the ambient temperatures which we should maintain. So at the arrival of the port, when we are exporting them, they should be ripe and they should be eatable. Palatable, I should say.
What I'll throw that back to you, and the way I'll actually answer that question is in the next couple of slides, is it's not how long you can keep it, it's how long do you have to keep it to make it successful. And how long we can install mangoes, well, we can store them quite some time. How long we can do it is commercially practical is another question, but the real question is how long do we have to do it to make this work? That's the key question. So that's, we'll put that down as a...
And the short answer is 7 days at the retailer.
Yes, the shelf life as well.
Yeah.
You're very right. and the shelf life.
That's around, yeah, and I'll show you a timeline in a sec.
And last year experience was that there were wrinkles when it arrived here. So how to control that? Or due to temperature variation or something other than
Dehydration. Yeah.
Sorry, will excuse us for this.
Yeah.
Just a second.
So any other
So there will be jelly formation inside. I don't know about that, but I read that there is a problem with it.
Yeah, jelly seed. What about sort of logistics issues like communication between how are you going to communicate between yourselves and the buyer, how the information is going to flow? Is that a concern?
Well, this is a specific question related to SMG. What we have decided amongst ourselves that we have asked. I'm the person who's communicating. It's not on the behalf of the group. We have identified one person. It can be me or it can be somebody else. At the point of time, who's communicating with them. This basically on the email.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've got a list there which we'll put up towards the end, and because I will raise up a whole heap of risks I think you haven't looked at yet.
Yes. Okay.
And the important thing is we need to identify them, and we need to understand exactly what those risks are. And I guess the way I put it, the way I say it, there's three main risks. First one is disease. Second one is disease. And the third one is atoms, 1 and 2. If you can't get on top of your disease, the thing's going to fail. There's no doubt about it. And that is absolutely critical to invest into working a system that you can manage it. And those systems are available and they're certainly doable, but it is something you need to keep in mind. It is the thing that's going to pull you up before anything else. Post-harvest disease is basically where the fruit is rotting post-shipment. The actual disease inoculum occurs in your orchards, but it doesn't express itself until the fruit is ripe. And you end up, you can see the scenario, you end up on the market floor and they've got fruit and it's got rots on it. The consumers have virtually zero tolerance for rots. So it's the number one thing to keep back in your mind that really, once we can solve that, once you can guarantee you can get on top of that, the rest of it can fall into place relatively easily.
Last year's experience, Junaid and I had, that the disease and MRL level was in control, acceptable level. What they sent our report.
Yes.
So therefore we are confident. Otherwise, we must have indicated disease.
Yes. Yeah. But the thing is to be able to do it consistently year in, year out.
Yeah.
Consignment in, consignment out. And so you have to build a system that's flexible and actually will deal with that. So you don't have having a container that's fully rotten.
So what Shane is absolutely correct in the sense that we don't have a prescribed system, as you're saying, which is so formal that it is followed through and that the arrival quality remains the same. You understand?
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than the system for disease management, it's really adhering to certain principles, and you can tailor them to your situation. But the important thing is monitoring it. We'll talk about disease as we go on. Temperature management, absolutely paramount in stopping this roller coaster of temperatures, which is currently what's happening. We need to understand a very important one, as someone pointed out, I think it was yourself pointed out, on arrival, how they handle the fruit. CA systems actually do change the physiology of the fruit. And understanding that and getting the importer to understand that and how to handle that is extremely important, because you can get everything right and the whole thing can fall apart if there's a lack of understanding of what the fruit's going to arrive at. And that becomes a problem. And of course the main issue of this slide is how to mitigate those risks and how to manage them. So I'll quickly run through, I don't spend much time on that. Effectively there's 3 options of shipping. I'm not including open top reefer because I don't think that's an option at all. Is the standard reefer, which someone I think I've here alluded to, that they've actually sent some stuff to Europe, which is basically just maintaining temperature only. We have a modified atmosphere. That's the system that can fit into any container. It works some of the principles of controlled atmosphere, but not all of them. It's problematic, our experience with it, but it's the advantage of it. You're talking about Maersk having to pre-order the containers. The advantage of this, it will fit into most new containers, and it's reasonably cost effective. But I would put it at a higher risk than controlled atmosphere. Controlled atmosphere is the best system for maintaining this storage life. The containers, as Mahmood alluded to, has to be booked well in advance because there's only, well, I don't know how many now, but there's only about 1,500, 2,000 containers globally, and you have to book well ahead in advance from Maersk to get them. There is additional costs, an extra $1,500 US costs for a container for the controlled atmosphere system, and it requires quite precise, correct handling systems as well.
Tell us what controlled atmosphere is.
Controlled atmosphere is effectively what we're doing is we're putting the fruit to sleep. When you pick a piece of fruit, it's still alive and it's breathing as we do and respiring. And effectively what we're doing is we're raising the carbon dioxide and we're lowering the oxygen. So effectively we're putting that fruit to sleep. And it goes into the container, you slow the respiration down, it's like a hibernation process, and the fruit just basically, everything slows down to absolute. You can't slow it down completely because you end up then destroying the fruit. But you slow it down to a point where it's just in a deep slumber. And then we have to wake it up at the other end. Okay. Timelines, and picking your freight system to your market is really important, understanding the transportation times. But this is roughly your shipping times. Singapore, you're looking at 6 days, Hong Kong 17, Dubai 3, London 18, if we're really ambitious, Vancouver 33 days. So that's only part, if we flick over to the next slide. Okay, that's only part, unfortunately the colours don't come out. That's only part of the process, and that's this bit here to here is your shipping time. The reality is you're going to need, for an 18-day shipping time, you're going to need your, which will answer your question there, a 32, 33-day shelf life. The reality is, this is the only bit that matters. Because when you're going into a market, you have to have shelf life. And into a European supermarket chain, they need 7 days. The systems just can't handle fruit anything less than that. You can't give them 7 days shelf life post-arrival, then you're really cutting yourself out of the options of going through the supermarket chains. There are other chains and supply chains in Europe and other markets that handle stuff quicker, but to access the supermarkets and the big guys, and they are the dominant players by a long shot, you must be able to deliver them 7 days shelf life. The important thing is here, what you do here in the first 4 days has a dramatic impact on what happens here. How you manage these first 5 days is really the indicator. CA shipping really is a minor component of the whole system. And it's actually probably the easiest component to manage and run out of this whole process. So the important thing is we don't get too hung up with it. We know it works, and you get everything right, it works well. And it's how we manage this process and how we manage this process is really the key to how it's going to work.
And you could think of CA shipping as just a service activity servicing your chain. It's not the answer. It's just a service part in the middle.
Right.
So
I have a question over here, Mr. Peter. You said putting the fruit to sleep.
Yep.
How much atmospheric carbon dioxide do you have to pump in into a container, and how much oxygen?
Well, we don't actually pump any carbon dioxide. It actually lets the fruit do it itself, because the fruit generates carbon dioxide. It reaches a set point, which we set, and we usually set it around 3 to 4%. When it reaches that, the container automatically starts controlling it. Okay? And then by raising that, it then by default lowers the oxygen levels because it's using the oxygen up. And we reduce the oxygen, which current oxygen is about 16% atmospheric oxygen. We reduce that down to about 1.5 to 2%. See, there's not a lot of air for them to breathe, and effectively there is some latitude within those parameters, but not a lot because you have other effects if you start going too far inside those settings. So basically that's the container controls, and that's the electronic systems in the container control and monitor the gas, and they control the levels, and they'll vent at certain times and then things. So they don't actually inject any gas in, they're just using the fruit, what the fruit's generating to do it for.
It's recycling.
Basically, it's within the container, and then when it reaches a certain point, then eventually it'll have to let some fresh air in to reduce the carbon dioxide levels.
Regarding the temperature to be maintained,
The temperature's maintained at a constant.
how much should it be the temperature in a river?
Well, that depends again on where you're sending it to and what your customer
Supposing we are
requirements are.
sending it to Europe,
Yeah, and but so what the customer requirements are and what the stage maturity of the fruit. And we find in some work that Dr. Malek's been doing in the lab with the varieties to test it to find out how low we can go. I'll give you an example which I don't have those figures exactly now. We have to get Malek to give us them. But in our situation, we work within a range of 10.5 to 11.5 degrees. 10.5 to 11.5. And we base that on the maturity of the fruit.
you see, last year, some of our growers, they had sent this to Sweden. The shipment took about 22 days. And when they took out the mangoes were aged. They looked old. They had wrinkles all over. And they went at about 12 degrees centigrade. So you mean to say that we should lower the temperature down?
We'll have to look at the work that Dr. Malek's done. I haven't got that at the figures yet. But you can managing temperature. I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. If you can hold that thought, I'll explain what you just said there in the next couple of slides. So if we can just. So I'll just go back to the containers. Is which to choose. As a rule of thumb, I mean it's not hard and set, but we sort of work on anything more than 10 days. Anything less than 10 days, sorry, you can get away with standard rate. 10 to 15 days is probably where modified atmospheres have a bit of a role, or 0 to 15 days. Anything above this sort of 10 days to 30 days is you really do need to work with a controlled atmosphere. You are not going to get the shelf life out of the fruit in standard reefer beyond 10 days. You just won't get it. Remember we're talking about shelf life, we're talking about the saleable life. That's 7 days that we need on arrival. That's the important work we need to be doing. So what you want to do is talk about where you're going with the fruit, and actually as growers you need to actually look at growing your fruit for that market, not trying to just have some fruit and decide, okay, I want to send it to this market. And that's very important when it comes to Europe, and particularly when you come to accreditation. The Global Gap, for example, some supermarket chains, not all, but some, won't accept fruit unless you've got the right accreditations. Europe is very, very hot on chemical MRLs, and they will condemn a consignment, they'll test it, and you can guarantee if you're landing in the Netherlands, your fruit will be tested probably once or even twice. You can almost guarantee it. They're right on the ball. The guys there waiting when the containers are open, they'll get it, they'll whip some food off and test it. So the chance are if you're doing the wrong thing, you'll get caught. And which does make it a bit challenging in the markets. The Netherlands is right on top of it. Some countries aren't as tough as that. UK is probably slightly less than the Netherlands in our experience because it gets intercepted in the UK at the supermarkets. And they do the testing that's coming in rather than the wharf service going through the supply chain. Netherlands, our experience, the guys are usually waiting on the wharfs for it. So understanding what's written on here is really doesn't matter, but this is a chemical list with different MRLs of what you can and can't use. But also, if you're going into Europe, what you be careful of. This is an example of Waitrose supermarket. Those who've been in London are probably not familiar with Waitrose. What they've gone to their customers is to their customers and said, oh well, this is the standard MRLs that the government's doing. Well, we're going to go lower than that. And our MRL standards are lower than that. So if you are actually selling to Waitrose, you actually have to be below what the legal requirements are. So again, knowing where that fruit's going to go and if there's any peculiarities for that is really, really important. So communication and having a system which Global Gap would be part of is that what you're spraying, what you're using on your crops, and the buyer actually has full access to that. So they don't want to get caught with stuff that's going to get condemned, and you don't want to send stuff that's going to get condemned. So right, disease management. This is, like I said before, this is the key to getting it to work. And how, if you can't get on top of the disease, then it's really, you have to think twice about what you're going to do, because it's really, you just get, there's levels of disease in a container when it arrives. They open the doors, there's a certain amount of disease. Some of the buyers will just walk away straight. Some will actually vet it out. A lot won't, because they know that the next day there's going to have to start vetting it again, and it goes on. To control, now I said, beginning at our growers in Western Australia, we were in the same boat that you guys were 12 years ago, and we actually had very little tools in our armoury to control disease. And so we opted for a really integrated approach. We did have some chemical options, but there is no chemical silver bullet, and that's an important thing to understand. But to get it to work, you need to look at orchard management, handling practices, and then some post-harvest treatments. We started looking at the levels, and to start with that process is looking at identifying blocks. This is an activity which we've been starting with the ASLP. Nothing hard. You've been about that as well. Is trying to actually identify what's out there. Are there blocks out there with low levels of disease naturally? And in our experience, there are. In Australia, I can't see why there wouldn't be in Pakistan as well. It's a matter of finding those blocks, and they're the ones you start targeting to look at sourcing fruit from initially. And then the other blocks you look at bringing them down so they can meet that sort of level. And you do that with a series of hygiene control programs and post-harvest. We don't have time today to go into all the nitty-gritties of that, and that's really important stuff that over next, we can actually talk about over the next few months. Next time. Okay. And this is an example of what we're trying to do, and what we're actually trying to do. This is some evaluations we've done from different blocks in Western Australia, different growers, all the same district. We're finding some blocks up to 90% disease, and yet we're consistently getting a group of blocks here with less than 10% disease in that fruit. And some of these was from here, we're actually from the same grower. This is a large grower that had a number of different sites, and some of his sites were riddled with disease, and some of his were actually quite low. So But identifying them, and that's the important thing. We need to start identifying them, because then once you identify them and start working with those blocks, that's when you look at post-harvest treatments really going to work. It's going to be very, very effective. If you start applying post-harvest chemicals on here, yeah, sure, you reduce it maybe down to this level, but the reality in the market for the consumer, one mango spot of disease is too much. So here you might have 20 spots of fruit, disease on the fruit. Here we might only have 2, but the reality is you have to have 0. And the consumer wants 0. And there's no way around that. There is 0 tolerance for disease level. But applying a post-harvest chemical here is not going to get you to 0. It will get you down to maybe 1 or 2, but 1 or 2 is not good enough. Applying it here is really going to, that's going to get you 0. This is where it's going to really be effective. This was the colour's not showing. This is actually, get back to your question about time, this is actually fruit for sale in Lafayette Galleria in Paris. That's 40 days old. Sorry? This is from Australia. This is been seed.
Is that KPs?
KPs, yeah. And what we find with KPs in the way they handle CA is very, very similar. There's a lot of parallels with Cypri and Chance. So they're similar sort of varieties. They're not like the Florida varieties. So what our lessons we learned here are actually very applicable to the Pakistan varieties. I mean, we can see this is a container which we had 9 suppliers, 9 different farmers in there, and this is results we're getting consistently. You know, 0, 0, 0. You're still never completely eliminated, and that's something we need to talk about down the track as part of your risks. And another risk that we'll add to that list is what do you do with that percentage that's no good? And the reality is there are options in Europe to do something with it. Now you're not going to probably make money on it, but you'll probably cover your costs on that percentage of fruit, and that's important because that makes the whole business profitable. Harvesting, this is where we start getting to the CA, where the difference between CA and normal handling systems work. What we found, and the colour's not going to come out, you can just imagine this is virtually white and this is white orange. And this is the internal colours of the mango. And with Dr. Malik and his team, we've actually been developing some of these charts for Pakistan varieties, so you'll have that available to you. Traditionally in Australia, we used to harvest, and we still do, for domestic market, we harvest that when they just slightly turned internally, they've gone a little bit white, a little bit green colour, and we ripen them up, and they produce quite a presentable product, edible product, sugars are okay. However, when we start putting fruit, the thinking was at the time, and this is one of our big mistakes we made, thinking at the time was, the more backward the fruit, the more shelf life we're going to get out of it. And that is, we're very wrong in that. What you find is fruit in this category that's actually just started to turn, that's when you start getting your problems with chilling. So the gentleman over here with this question about the damage with the chilling. This fruit is much more susceptible to damage and problems in the full chain than fruit down here. Much more robust. And bearing in mind that the CA system is putting it to sleep, so you've got fruit that's actually a bit more advanced in maturity, it's going to sleep, and it doesn't make a big difference at the other end. But it makes a huge difference in the susceptibility of that fruit to temperature. So getting back to your question, I'm working around getting to it, is if you put fruit in at this stage of maturity, if we stick that in at 12 degrees, we'll damage probably 30 to 40% of it. If we stick fruit in at this maturity, at 10.5 degrees, we'll probably get 0 damage. But you don't just put it straight in, there is a way to get it to 10.5. You don't put it straight down to 10, it has to be conditioned to that thing, so that there's another process we can talk about. I think probably I might just, we're talking about actually harvest systems, I might just skip over that because I want to try and get through, and that's something that actually you have time just to think about. So if we skip over that, we'll, one thing I wanted to, important thing consideration I asked them when you're talking about 4 different pack houses. And what we need to look at is a system, and everyone to think about, is how they're going to get that fruit from your orchard to your pack house with minimum delays, and you minimise any additional heating that fruit's going to get. Because you've got fruit that's coming in that's been picked, that's probably, core temperature is probably going to be in the high 30s. Well, your ambient temperature is what, 45, 40, up to 50 sometimes? But, you know, in the high 40s, between 40 and 50. The pulp, internal pulp temperature, because that's always cool in the ambient, that's going to be around the, Commissioner, 36. What is it? 36, yeah. So, you're going to have fruit around that. The important thing is, once you pick it, you're not getting the water flowing around that fruit, so that fruit potentially can get hotter. So having a system is getting that fruit to the pack house as quickly as possible and minimising any additional heat. So keeping it shady, thinking about what times of day you're going to transport it is really important, because remember I said before, whatever happens at this end, you pay for it at that end. It comes at a cost. Whatever you do here comes at a cost, and that cost is shelf life. Dust. There is a lot of dust around on the roads, and we need to look at the way you can actually minimise the fruit's contact with dust. Because dust causes abrasion and transport, rubbing, and it's just like rubbing sandpaper over the fruit, and that doesn't show up immediately. It shows up 4, 5, sometimes 6 days after you've harvested the fruit, and as farmers and packers, you don't have to see it. But the guy down the other end, he sees it. and so dust is a really major problem, and trying to think ways you can actually minimise the contact with the fruit, and that's even how you pack the fruit in the crates, avoiding soil contacts, etc. Suspension of the trucks, that's what I'm talking about, truck suspension there. If they're going over long roads, having good suspension on your trucks is really essential, because you are the impact of the fruit, and it's substantial. I think we looked at before, there were some options available. So yeah, that actually have good suspension, and that is really, really important, because it does have the constant pounding of the fruit, and especially if it's, imagine that, a little bit of sap, a little bit of dust, fruit going bang, 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 bang. It's you're going to see it at the other end. And the configuration on how you actually load the trucks is also really important too, because if you don't get the right connectors, your crates moving and so forth. Right. Preparing the packing shed. Effectively, what you need to bear in mind is, with controlled atmosphere, it changes the physiology of the fruit, and actually, as it arrives, or through the process of the controlled atmosphere, it makes the first layers of the skin soft. So when you actually pick up a fruit that's been CA, it actually has a bit of give, and it feels like it's ripe. It's not, but it has that funny feeling about it. And understanding that is really important, and particularly at the other end of the market. It's it's absolutely essential to understand that. But at your end of the market, at your end of the chain, it's really important to understand is that when you're packing the fruit, is they need to be firm, but not really tight, because what happens is they tend to depress and you end up with misshapen fruit. So firmly but not tight. And of course, the other thing which we can go into, we can talk about details, but actually loading the containers is absolutely critical. Sea containers, they vent from the floor upwards, whereas a truck vents from the top down. And so how you load your cartons, your pallets, the configuration, the gaps, how you load and put that in container, absolutely essential for the system to work. If they're just sort of bunged in and you've got big gaps like this, what happens with air, it goes to the path of least resistance, so it will go up a big rush up that gap and you won't get proper cooling around the fruit. So that's something we can talk about in a lot more detail. It does need more detail. I just want to highlight that to you. It's very essential. So getting the right pallet size, getting the right carton that fits over the edge of the pallets, and what type of ventilation you've got on the carton, all is extremely important. And that's something we do need to look at. Poor quality cartons are they're not only a Pakistani problem. This is Australian, which is not shown too well because the colour. These are all collapsed cartons in Australia. As you can see, it's nice flat fruit on the top. This is actually some Pakistani cartons. It's a major issue, and carton strength is absolutely paramount because not only you need to maximise your space in your container because there's a cost efficiency there, of course. But you want to make sure you don't get those bottom, what's the point of going up 15 layers if the first 3 layers are going to be written off? So you have to have cartons that are going to handle that sort of strength. One of the other issues with cartons, you can actually have quite strong walls in the cartons, but as you can see there, it's both. This is the level of the carton and the sag. And as cartons go in containers longer, they tend to absorb a little bit of moisture, the weight of the fruit, and the bottom of the carton starts to go down like that. The smaller the carton, the less of a problem it really is. But the larger the carton, it's always, if you start going to large cartons, it becomes a much bigger problem. This is some typical sea freight cartons. This one's from Spain, and this one's from Brazil. All open topped. Got cutaways there so you get airflow there. And generally very strong corners. There's the corners in these, you can see here where it's reinforced. That takes all the weight. And they lock into each other. If you find these cartons all lock into the weight, that stops a lot of sliding and if you don't strap properly. So you see the cartons and the consideration is paramount. They must have the strength. They must have airflow that matches sea freight configurations. Now, holes in the, as I said before, sea freight vents from the bottom. Actually, having holes in the bottom of the carton facilitates the airflow. It's not the only way you can do it though. With sea freight cartons, if you've got the cutaway there, so you've got a large air space there between the two cartons, there's a gap like that in between here. And again, we get back to configuration, you have at least one face of that carton that faces the outside of the pallet. And that way, it works like a refrigerator. You've got a cold face, and the cold face then generates actually air currents within the carton. Oh, sorry. The other thing with cartons is which is really important to start again, is market appeal. Some markets, and you need to be talking to what your customer wants, but some actually want printed cartons, some don't, depends on what they're going to do with it. Printed cartons actually, I know when we did this, this is another one of our mistakes, we actually did go into plain black cartons because we were sending predominantly into Sainsbury's, and that's what they do. The downside of that is, if Sainsbury's don't want it for some reason, they say, oh, we don't want this much, or this one's not up to spec. Suddenly you've got a black carton on the market, and everyone goes, oh, that's one Sainsbury's rejected. We don't want to buy that, but we're going to pay very little for it. So you need to be a little bit careful going to that. The other thing is that having a uniform, a printed carton also then potentially gives you other options for other market outlets. We'll let Tony and Ray talk about the marketing side of it. And uniformity. So, you know, having one consignment with uniform carts, not made up of all different brands and stuff. Height, very important, because you need to accommodate for, you know, that all carts are going to sag to a certain degree, and you need to allow for that. If you're fitting for, again, that comes to understanding where you, and you've got talks you have with your customers, where you're going to send it and what their requirements are. Sometimes they want to stock the cart straight to their shelves. But down here is one of the most critical things, is they must fit the pallet correctly. Because you can have the best carton in the world, and if it doesn't